August 9th, 2026. Can you believe it? Oh my gosh. Let's make sure that we're on. It's 12:36 a.m. in the morning. Can't be helped. We have been so busy. And good news, so much good news, and we're just trying to catch up on what's going on in the military, right? Try to catch up on everything because it has been every day breaking news, and we need to know, what are the updates. So finally getting around to that, and wowzer, wowzer, let's start before I tell you that ForceCom is gone. And I mentioned it last night, but I just wanted to read up on it a little bit. Um, wow, it's just such a blessing. It's such a blessing. So let's, we are on day 2,197 days, I believe. Let's make sure that I'm right. Make sure this is all connected. Yep, 2,197 days. I'm absolutely right. And, y- you know, to try to keep up with President Trump and everything that he's doing, because, one of the, uh, of course, day one when he took office on January 20th, 2025, he designated many different cartels as foreign terroristic organizations. Now he's updated that as specially designated global terrorist organizations. And of course, he added the Juarez cartel recently, which is so important to our son's case. So glad to see that. And then since then, in like about 18 months, 19 months, he has used that to turn off their funding in every which way, turn off the funding because the theft is unbelievable. The fraud is unbelievable. And it was just uh, being so manipulated and so much crime coming from all of the fraud and theft and just millions and billions of dollars, and I would even say uh tapping into the trillions of dollars of misused uh taxpayer and debt, right? That's our future, our debt that was being misused. And I've always said, our roads for all the money that we're in debt, and I've said it on this live stream, we should be on like silver roads, gold roads, for all of the money that we're in debt. There should be something to show for it. And what we have is a bunch of crime, a bunch of deception, a bunch of fraud, a bunch of theft, and that has uh, caused the child trafficking, the sex trafficking, the human sex trafficking, the illegal drug trafficking, and and then this fuel theft. And I was listening to some podcasters talking about the fuel theft, right? Not the fuel theft, about Iran. They were talking about this situation in the Strait of Hormuz and President Trump, and they're like, oh well, Europe is buying the oil and Russia's been buying the oil. They've always been buying the oil all the time. all the time, and I think they're right. But they don't realize that the oil that they're buying is stolen oil, stolen from the premium basin, stolen from Pemex, Mexican Pemex oil. Um, and is we know that that's for sure. So where else are they stealing the oil? And this is their playbook that they're stealing the oil. It costs very little to get oil out of the ground. The earth makes it. It costs 10 cents for a barrel of oil, maybe, because there's, technology. You have to add in the technology and everything. But, and then we know through this fuel theft that has been exposed now that they were buying it for $10, $15 a barrel, right? Which is, so the people that are extracting it from the ground are making money, and then they're, uh, s- you know, buying it for 10, 15 when it's really around $80 on the WIT. And then, of course, they clean up the crude and put it into the, um, the gas stations at the $80 price, which is like a 400 over $400 markup of, of, uh, you know, of stolen fuel, right? So, this was, and they were doing it with impunity. And so they were taking it from Pemex and they started with just tapping into the pipelines, right? And that still is, like a Robin Hood kind of theft, right? Um, but then it started getting more of a fraud on it where you didn't have to pay taxes. And this is the point that I want to get to is, people have been talking about New York and the leadership, and they threatened to tax and this communist, and they threatened to tax, and the people still vote. Who's still voting for these people, right? Who's still wanting these people to get in? It's the people that never pay taxes. They don't pay taxes on stolen fuel, right? They don't pay taxes on that, so they don't care about the tax rate, right? If they're stealing everything and doing everything under the table, then who cares about the tax rate? That's what's going on here. And so, they're stealing from Pemex with fraudulent paperwork so they don't have to pay the going rate on taxes, right? You're on secret payrolls with the Chihuahuan governor, the El Chapo fentanyl governor Maru Campos, right? You don't pay taxes on that. You're stealing from the premium basin. You're not paying taxes on that. And then you're stealing from our military bases like Fort Bliss. And this is, there's many, many reasons for why Richard was such a threat. And because Richard was reporting on all of this, including the orchestrated Walmart mass shooting, evidence on that. So he, of course, the child trafficking, 500,000 children trafficked through Fort Bliss, right? Starting March of 2021. Richard was warning that there was trafficking going on. And then in March of 2021, they really, had the door open. And they did exactly what Richard was warning about. And that's why evidence indicates that he was warning that they were planning on this orchestrated Walmart mass shooting before even a shot was fired. And of course, the connections to his case with those that control the distribution of oil on Fort Bliss, right? And then, of course, you have the gun trafficking that goes with it because in order to protect the pipeline, you have to have your tax free military, right? And so they don't pay taxes on this, and then the way they, launder the money and of course, sell the well, brainwash the people, to divert their attention is with tax-free organizations like El Paso Community Foundation and El Paso Matters. They're 501c3. They don't pay taxes. They don't taxes are not for them, right? You know, uh, so they're going around and around, eh, stealing and extorting and exploiting and trafficking and, deceiving. It's all deception, which is, you know, their playbook is just living in deception. And people might not even sound so evil, but it is. It's just the exact way that Satan works, right? Is deception. So it is very, very serious. And so now we have this family, the Jensen's family, that are very well connected, and they're very well connected with El Paso, y'all. They're very well connected to the Premium Basin. They're very well connected to El Paso and sorry, and also Pemex, right? Chihuahua, Mexico. They're very connected to CJNG leadership, which is right there in El Paso, right? They're established in El Paso. They're established in Chihuahua, Mexico, and of course, they are absolutely connected with the Juarez cartel and the Sinaloa cartel because they're all in alliance with this major fuel theft and the trafficking that goes with it, the drug trafficking, the weapons, um, the uh, the children trafficking, and all of uh, then the contracts, right? The contracts. We got to get the government contracts, and do they even pay taxes on that? Well, then you have Golden Jensen, right? The son, um, that here his family. Uh, is indicted for this major, major fuel theft, okay? Major fuel theft on the border, and it's called fiscal watchical, right? Fiscal watchical, meaning it is like a modern, more sophisticated, tax-free way of stealing the oil, the crude, and then selling it to on the penny to a refinery, and then the refinery buying the stolen fuel that they've paid CJNG for, right? In this case, it's CJNG cartel, the flesh eaters. Sorry, but that's what they are, flesh eaters. Um, and yeah, and and paying them and selling the stolen tax free, right? The tax free oil to the refineries, or they pay a little, maybe they pay a little just so, you know, the treasury, who knows? The treasury has to be a little bit happy because of the senators. The senators have to be a little bit happy, they have to get a little bit of the tax money to pay their wages. But of course, the Senate is like one big cartel protecting body, right? They're not acting for the benefit of the people of the United States, that's for sure. And I know that there's a lot of people that are agreeing with me on that because everyone is complaining that look at how they have conducted themselves. They've conducted themselves in protecting the criminal class, right? Which are the cartel, the terroristic organizations that have been exploiting and stealing and infiltrating into our countries. Uh, not just the United States, but also Mexico, and then hurting, um, hurting our relationships because we don't even understand what's fully going on. And so they go, oh, the US is doing this and Mexico is doing that. And all along, it's this criminal class, right? It's this criminal class that have infiltrated, that have no loyalty to Mexico or no loyalty to the United States, no loyalty to Iran, right? No loyalty to Europe. They are just a criminal class. And in our son's case, it's a Mormon mafia. Okay. It's a Mormon mafia. And it seems that in this surrounding area, when it comes to the fuel, it's the Mormon mafia because the Jensens are a Mormon mafia. I didn't make that up. I didn't make that up. That's in the court cases. Okay. I didn't, this is not a slur. This is absolutely in the court cases that they are called the Mormon Mafia, and in the intelligence community. And why can I put the Jensens with the intelligence community? Because their son Golden works for MITRE. I don't know if he still works for MITRE since all the arrests started happening and the indictments, but MITRE Corporation, are you kidding? And they're tax free, y'all. They are a 501c3. And okay, so MITRE, and I'm still wrapping my head around this. That Golden Jensen, with his educate, you should see his education list. It is just like jaw dropping, right? Of course, this is a very, very wealthy family on ill-gotten gains because they never had to pay taxes. They didn't pay, and then they get, like, okay, we'll be in the Marines or something, and we'll get some kind of benefit or whatever that we don't have to pay uh, taxes on our home or whatever, just like Leilani Hart. She doesn't have to pay property taxes. They don't have to pay property taxes. They get these criminal class privileges from infiltrating the system. Am I going global? I don't know if I'm going global, but I'm really focusing on the El Paso, Chihuahua area because that is where our son's remains are. And this is where we need to work to get our son's remains back and also the accountability because there's no peace unless there is restitution, right? There is no forgiveness without restitution, right? There is no forgiveness without accountability. It's just and there is like I don't know this thing like you're just supposed to forgive without them paying any kind of restitution or um account for what they've done. And, what is that? That's like the modern day thing of forgiveness or whatever. And, sorry, but that's just not how it works. That's just not how it works. Criminals can't just say, "Oh, sorry," uh, you know, and then and think that justice has been served. That's just not how it works. And so you saw that with this whole thing with Fauci, right? You know, people want him held accountable. And his wife is mad because, they're not taking his pleading the fifth. They're not taking that, oh, okay, sorry. I don't even think he said sorry. I don't know. I don't think he said sorry. But, and then she flips the finger at everybody. She flips the finger. I mean, this mass murderer, how dare we want him to be held accountable for all of the crimes that he has committed against humanity? Um, you know, because we want peace, right? We want peace. And the only thing that brings us forgiveness and peace is the restitution, the accountability. That's what then we can forgive him. When he pays for what he's done, when he's paid that price, and he's looking at the ultimate price, and rightfully so. And I think that's the only thing that will give us peace, right? Um, is a court that actually holds him accountable. And this is the same thing in our son's case. And that's why we're looking at that area. And when you have the family of these fuel thefts, right? Because the trafficking and the fuel theft, this is all the same criminal class. And these are then the same criminal class, the same group that got greedy, got compromised, went into Fort Bliss, that endangered all of our soldiers, tried to compromise all of our soldiers with terrible things that hurt them mentally and physically. Suicides were going way up. Some of the suicides were not like really, and I don't even know if I'm allowed to say self-harm. The military was having so many problems with the drug use and the alcohol and the self-harm and all of that. And some of those self-harms were not really self-harms. It's all cover-up stuff. That has been exposed. But, they got into, when you have volunteer sons and daughters that have to live in a barracks and they have nowhere else to go, right? They cannot go anywhere because then they're called, AWOL or something like this, if they're trying to get away from the danger, right? And, uh, y for Richard to be whistleblowing and then his reports to be blocked, and then for him to be retaliated against, then to ask for transfers and be denied transfers, and then a code red be ordered against him where he is forcibly dragged out of his barracks room, taken downstairs to the arms room because it is a secure, uh, location that, uh, you know, not everyone, restricted area that is soundproof, that they could take his life there and desecrate his body and then have the connections with the mortuary operations so that they could steal his body off of Fort Bliss and dispose of it there where evidence indicates at a Plenitude narco crematorium funeral home, that they left, bodies piled up and everything. And the owners are Argo Oil and Gas, are Cano Steel, you know, I mean, and part of this purchase group of purchase, a criminal class that purchases also part of this um uh oil theft, you know? And then they're connected to Beto O'Rourke, which is connected to La Diablo, which is organ harvesting and baby harvesting. And so it's not enough to traffic women and children and guns and drugs. They have to get into and organ harvesting on the black market, and babies, and to target pregnant women, and not only that, but to target active duty women, right? Uh, which is part of this case. And so, this is why they went after our son so bad with the biggest guns, and then came after our family. And the generals in Forcecom were absolutely compromised. Absolutely compromised. And now breaking news, and it's not such breaking news, December 5th, 2025. So it's a few months old, right? But Forcecom was absolutely purged. it was closed down, it was shut down. And that, the headquarters was at Fort Bragg. And remember, one of our phone calls that we traced that was harassing us and threatening us, and with the most vile and vulgar messages and everything, that had access. They had access to our information. Okay, that's why the messages were, kind of shocking, because they knew things that no one could know unless you had access to our private information. And one of those phone calls came from a pie shop in North Carolina, not far from Fort Bragg. And Fort Bragg was the headquarters for FORSCOM. And we know that they, just really, um, well, we know that Michael Garrett, the four-star general, he needs to be held accountable. Okay, for because we know that he was in on all of this. Okay, because you can't have what happened to Vanessa Guillen, what happened to Morales, what happened to Glennon Oakley Jr., the and what happened to Richard, and all the other. There's so many other, right? Enrique. Uh, you can't have all of that. And, I've just all these faces in my brain, all these faces that just, Asia Graham, I have a video in my head of her when she first joined the military. This beautiful, excited young lady that, that they posted up, and every time I think of her name, I think of that beautiful video when she was just so excited to serve, looking forward to being in the US Army, and then knowing everything that she went through, and how Forcecom absolutely targeted her, not just, let her down. This is and I really need to change my post, because it's not that they failed Richard. It's not that they failed Vanessa Guillen. It's not that they failed Asia Graham. It's not that they uh, failed Glennon Oakley Jr. It's not that they failed them. They targeted them. Okay. They targeted them. They retaliated against them. And with our son, they ordered a code red, and they took his life. And so, I'm uh, very happy to see the destruction of ForceCom. So it has been replaced, but the way they're reducing four-star billets 20%. That means four-star generals slots where they need them. They're being reduced by 20%. That is huge for a start. For a start, so is the National Guard. Their generals are being reduced 20%, and flag officers, their billets 10%. They're being reduced 10%. So, and it needs to be much further, right? Because we were at 44 four-star generals, which is a really weird number, when you look at numerology. Um, uh, and they were all corrupt. They were all corrupt, and we give our generals everything, right? We give them everything: great retirement, great pay, great living, great everything. And they just betrayed us, absolutely betrayed us. And so 44, when the military is only 10% of what it was during World War II, where there was only 7 four-star generals. I don't think we needed 44 of them, okay? When it can be, much bigger, and operate with 7. at a much greater efficiency. So, this what President Trump is doing, what Secretary of War Hegseth is doing, is very necessary. And that's not an opinion from me. That is because the evidence calls for it. It calls for it that we were so bloated and corrupt and exploiting and extorting and stealing and making alliances with our enemies, and also with the cartels. So yeah, that. So getting back to Jensen, so here's Jensen, and for some reason, and maybe someone knows, they have connections with the US Marines, okay, which is very interesting to us because that is a really big part of Richard's case, the US Marines, and along with the US Army. And so somehow they're connected to the US Marines. Um, Maybe they're just big fans of the US Marines. What do you think? What do you think? I don't know. But the Jensens here, they were stealing fuel, and their son, with illicit gains, are going to the most magnificent schools and then working for MITRE Corporation, which has access, you name it, to a government system, it has access to it. Okay. It is our intelligence agency, tax free, um, contracted, big corporation. Okay. And, it is just because he's a cybersecurity engineer, right? A cybersecurity, Golden Jensen, a cybersecurity engineer. Um, Yeah, like Michael Mayella, like Dallas Hart, like Jonathan Ambrose, these are all, like Tuganon Chan, and President Trump said this is a cyber attack, right? This is a cyber war. This is a new type of war, and these, s- you know, um, online money, with the uh, money laundering through the gambling and through um, the currency. What do you call them? Like Bitcoin and stuff. Anyway, all of that, and that's our reality today. Is that we have a cyber world that can commit a lot of crime. And so, we have a lot of hackers, a lot of people that abuse their gift of cybersecurity. And so to work at MITRE and be this huge government contractor with access to government information, and then be involved in fiscal watchical, watchical fiscal, meaning a sophisticated, fraudulent paperwork, or it's probably cyber, right? It's probably cyber theft of fuel, because it's more sophisticated, right? So, and you're talking about, millions and billions of dollars in crude oil and or other products, right, from oil. Because whatever comes from the premium basin is not the same as what comes from Pemex, is not the same that what comes from um, um, stealing the fuel right there off of our military bases like Fort Bliss. And if you look into MITRE, um, it's very interesting how that company got started, because it got started from MIT, from the Lincoln Lab, MIT. Well, when I read that, I mean, the whole transparency, the released records for Jeffrey Epstein that's where he was at. He was at the MIT lab, right? He was at the MIT lab. And then also from our family, and of course, he was right there on the north call out of White Sands Missile Range. He bought the lab there in Santa Fe, or oh gosh, it's so late, but right there in New Mexico, that lab that was kind of going under, and he hired those scientists, and so that, and of course, he's with William Sanders, uh, who has deep investments in the premium basin energy, and also the storage of crude oil and its products. So it all ties together. And if you have a family like mine, that my dad was a Nike and Hercules missile repairman in the days when it all started there in Operation Paperclip, when they brought the Germans to, at that time, it was called White Sands Proving Ground. Now it's called White Sands Missile Range, where I was born. I was born on White Sands Missile Range. And they brought in all of these German scientists, and these German scientists are the it was their programs with the MIT that created MITRE. Okay, it's the air defense. And just to see that connection with Jeffrey Epstein, with the Germans that were coming in, um, scientists, and of course this security from the Torre Centinela, um, which is the big tower there with the secret payroll for all these intelligence agents from they're rogue intelligence agents from our intelligence agencies, being in this big tower working for the Chihuahuan governor, unauthorized, right? Unauthorized, like they're trying to create their own colony, their own country. And what are they doing? They're deploying the Pegasus to gather all of the information from everyone's phone, because the Pegasus software can absolutely bypass all of your security, all of your passwords, and just harvest all of your data. And then, of course, the Taurus Sentinel is the AI to memorize, organize, analyze, to weaponize your data, right? Everyone's data. And of course, that's all along the border, over, what is it, $2 billion. Um, this system, and it's right there where White Sands is, where Fort Bliss is, where the Jensens are stealing the oil, and um, where all this military intelligence is, that MITRE has access to, right? So it is really like a deep state. It's just, but you have to also know that, um, being German and World War II, and I knew from my grandparents and my mother and all that, what was going on in Germany. That it's a country that lost the war, so it's a little different than, being in the States, where you're in a country that won the war, so to speak. I don't know for sure if we won the war, but we won the war. and then we're bringing over the German scientists that were working for the Dritte Reich, um, right there in Operation Paperclip, and right across the border, um, are the growing, Mormon colonies that, are right there in Chihuahua, and they're dual citizens. And Connell Wetton is really Mexican. Okay, he's really Mexican. He's not, because he's from the colonies in Mexico. Okay, and then you have um, this meeting. Can you imagine El Paso with the Mexican cartels and the Mormon mafia and the Operation Paperclip German scientists from the Dritte Reich? Can you imagine? This is the makeup of the epicenter, of this criminal class. Okay, this criminal class, and here Richard, living most of his life in Germany and in Ireland, um, traveling extensively, um, speaking German, um, goes to El Paso and has a different outlook, than uh, um, a normal American raised child. Now, or young man, right? Or young man. Um, he joined when he was 18. Um, and his dad, 30 years service in the army. So here he is, an army brat, right? He's a military brat. But, you know, very little time in the United States, very little time, homeschooled, right? Looking at things very different, and um, absolutely knowing what's right and wrong and what his duty is, because we catechized, right? We taught the catechism to our children. What is the chief end of man? The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. What does that mean? What does that mean? Um, so, Richard, looking through the lens very differently, and saying this criminal class needs to be reported. Justice needs to be served. And, you know, um, years of infiltration created this environment that was able to take our son's life. Not only that, but to cover it up, to hide his body, to keep his body. Um, and That's where we're at right now, is with President Trump changing this criminal class environment. And, the media there, you really can't trust it at all, because they give you this false narrative, right? Because they're protecting the criminal class. And so, and of course, the politics there are very controlled. I mean, I don't think El Pasoans voted for Veronica Escobar overwhelmingly. I don't think so. I don't think so. She's not too liked. Okay. I can say that with confidence. So something we know that the Walmart mass shooting was used to tamper with the election in 2020. So they're willing to do whatever to tamper with elections. Um, you know, so so this is how they could get away with what they did with Richard, but for a short time. And now things are different because there's a new sheriff in town, um and not just any sheriff, right? It's not like just a new sheriff. I mean, he gutted he destroyed, he took down Forcecom. Forcecom was like, I think it was the most powerful uh in the military. It's just amazing what is happening right now, the rebuilding of our country. And there is the criminal class are gnashing their teeth and clawing and everything. And that's why we can see who they are right now, right? Because their spigots have been turned off, um, and their schemes have been uh, not all exposed, but um, enough to know that they're there. And the media clearly, the Mayella, the whole Nadal Baim, the whole Mayella, um, and there's so much more. The whole David Frost situation, right? They're not reporting on that. They're not reporting on Richard. I mean, it should be, headline news. What is going on in Richard's case, right? And so you can tell that they are not genuine. And, our family even met with Tucker Carlson. He's not genuine. He's in bed with what, Qatar? Where Richard first declared, this is really bad. Something really bad is going on. Um, so yeah, it's very clear that who's who now. It's being revealed, and we have to be, really careful, discerning, um, because there's just so many psyop games going on right now. But I can tell you what I'm sure of, and that it's a good thing that Forcecom was disbanded. And I can tell you that Richard was a whistleblower and was retaliated against for standing up to this major criminal class. And I did report, it's 2 years since the kidnapping of El Mayo and all the things that are coming out with that. It's just amazing because Maru Campos is being investigated for treason. Okay. For, that hasn't gone away. Um, so, and this all plays a part together because it's the same people. And facilitated, this whole treasonous treaty facilitated by Alejandra de la Vega Foster. And what does she have? She has gas stations, right? And her husband has a refinery. And that is in connection with Beto O'Rourke's father-in-law, right? Um, and Beto, so they're all this. It's a small group, but they're all connected. And now to see that um, Jeffrey Epstein is coming in and again and into this as the premier money launderer, really. And of course, you know, when you're doing that kind of stuff, all the trafficking goes along with it because, they're just, they have no morals at all. So, okay, everyone, thank you. So let me read some of the comments now. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anicia, for coming on. And your prayers and your love all the time. You're an angel. I have my angel beside me. all the time. My grandkids love it too. Yeah, they love it. Um, Enrique, thank you so much. From Europe, yeah. I was in Europe for a long time. Yeah. Let's see. See. Hmm. I can't follow your trail so much. Okay. Okay, thank you so much for everything, and please share. And I did post up the flyer um for the petition to uh for a reward for all honors to Richard, and it has a QR code on it. And so, pass that around. Pass that around. We need a lot of signatures, y'all. We need a lot of signatures. But uh, we have a lot of support, so it can go really, really fast. Now, there is no. They might ask for a donation. Do not. There's no donation required. I mean, unless you wanted to for them, but there is no donation required. Just sign the petition. That is, thank you so much, and pass that around. Okay, everyone, I will be back tomorrow. Have a great Sunday, and thanks again.